Hi, everyone. This is Cindy from Dear Mom Reads and Writes. Welcome back. If you've been here before, you haven't been here long because I just started doing this about a month ago. And if this is your first time, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. I try to talk about, my goal is like 2 books at a time, which I've been doing. I don't know if that'll stay that way. There's sometimes a common thread between them, sometimes not. I love fiction and nonfiction, and today we're going to talk about fiction and nonfiction. So the first one is, I'm just going to jump right in, an epistolary novel, which I love. I've mentioned that before. It is a new novel. It is The Correspondent by Virginia Evans. I hope you can see that. This just came out in 2025, even has, an Ann Patchett blurb on the front cover. So I love Ann Patchett. So a good recommendation. I picked this up in a great bookstore in, where is it? Mooresville, North Carolina. I can't think of that. I didn't write the name down. I'm so sorry, but a great bookstore there. So I'm pleased to talk about this, and thank you to that bookstore for sharing it with me. This book's gotten a lot of, I think a lot of people are talking about it. So Virginia Evans, I believe this is her first novel. She is, yes, it is. She's been writing along, for years, but this is her first published novel. So, okay, what is this book about? This book is about a woman named Sybil, who's 73 years old. She's a retired, brilliant, once brilliant lawyer. She clerked for this famous judge. And she lives in a house by a river I think she's in Maryland, DC. I'm not sure. I should have written that down, but I didn't. Sorry about that. But so she writes. Her way is she lives alone. She's divorced. She lives alone in her house by the river, and her favorite form of communication is the written word, writing. So she writes letters to her good friend Rosalie, who they've been friends forever. And she writes letters to all kinds of people. She writes letters to her brother, Felix, her friend, as I said, Rosalie, her neighbor, Theodore, which seems weird to write letters to a next door neighbor, but she does. And she writes letters. I found this part fascinating. She writes letters to her favorite authors. She wrote a letter to Ann Patchett. She writes several letters to Joan Didion, A Year of Magical Thinking and Other Books fame, and Larry McMurtry, Lonesome Dove writer. So I found that really interesting about her. Anyway, and I love those authors as well. So, but she has 2 children, a son and a daughter. She's somewhat estranged from her daughter, but I don't know if I'll talk about that more, but like the rest of this book, her life unfolds as the letters continue. This was a slow burn for me. She's prickly and judgmental and not at least obviously emotional. She seems to hide under the words, and she has some friends she goes out and sees. There's 2 women she has lunch with, and she's in a plant group, but she feels very emotionally inaccessible, which I didn't love, but I grew to love, because as the letters are written, we see both sides of the correspondence. Her life unfolds. Let me just look at my notes here. Yeah, so all these letters she writes start telling the story of her life. And she has suffered, like many of a certain age, some tragedies, serious tragedy, and maybe part of that incident has kept her everything, tightly held. Sometimes the thought of going, into a painful situation, that the world will completely fall apart, and maybe it does. But in this story, we see a woman who was really cut off from her heart, it seems to me, gradually, not like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of whose heart melts, in literature. I can't think of it. Anyway, the unfolding of her life is fascinating and wonderful. And it's interesting to me that a woman, a writer in her 30s, wrote from a perspective of a 73-year-old. And she does a really good job of that. A great job, actually. And it's not that everyone at a certain age, I'm not dead yet, but I'm 65. And there's a tendency to look backward, maybe more than forward, not me. I'm still creating, doing things, but there's a recognition that you've already lived more years of your life than you're going to. And so there tends to be a looking backward, and which is what happens when she's kind of poked into this. I said earlier she's prickly and judgmental and standoffish kind of, but yet she has this correspondence with this 14-year-old child named Harry, who is really I think he's the son of a friend. He's having a very difficult time with school and just with his life. So she has this correspondence, very kind correspondence with this child. In addition, she befriends a customer service agent. She reaches out about technology to this company and doesn't love this person who she's connecting with at first, but over time, he really helps her, and she writes back to him personally. She communicates with him personally, and they develop a friendship. So, there's kindness in her heart. She's just not shown it for a long time, it seems. But the trajectory of this book, the time that this goes on, starts kind of there, cold and not so lovable, maybe. That might be the wrong word. But when you see what has happened in her life, a lot of that makes sense. And then you're rooting for her, or at least I was like, just do it. And I grew to love this character. And I definitely love this book. I can't recommend it more. The Correspondent by Virginia Evans. It's really a wonderful read. Like I said, maybe it won't for you, but for me, it was a slow start, but give it a chance because the unfolding of her life is fascinating. And it's a story about women and a story about a woman of a certain age, which, as you may or may not know, is not so popular in our culture. Not a lot of stories about mature women are celebrated so much. So, woohoo, Virginia Evans. Check it out. If you've already read it, I look forward to, let me know what you think of it. So, anyway, moving on to the next book. We're doing like kind of a 360 turn here. I mentioned earlier that I love nonfiction. And one of the areas in nonfiction I really adore is nature writing. So, Thoreau, Walden. That started in high school when I read that book, and Emerson, and that whole group of transcendentalists, nature philosophers. I fell in love with that style of writing. And so the book I'm going to talk about next is written by Hal Borland. This is The 12 Moons of the Year, his own selection from his nature editorials in the New York Times, edited by his wife. So, who is Hal Borland? He's been gone a long time. He died in 1978. For 35-ish years or so, he wrote this, anonymous editorial in the New York Times, kind of life from the country. And this collection I've had it forever. I've dog-eared pages. Actually, it needs repair work because it's coming apart from the binding. So I'm going to actually look out for another copy of this if I can. But I've had this by my bedside forever. I bought it, it looks like, I think I did buy it from LL Bean. There you go, for $10, $9.95, in probably 20 years ago, maybe longer. I don't think when I bought this, I may not have known about Hal Borland. I haven't read any of his, I have read some of his other books. He wrote a lot of books. Excuse me, but this one, getting back to this one, is just, so it's a page a day. It's a page for every day of the year. Observations from his farm, observations of just nature in general, and they're absolutely beautiful. So every night, well, actually, only recently, because as I may have mentioned, I moved recently and did not have this by my bedside for a little while. And so I just got it out, found it, and kind of went back and read some of my favorites. And now I'm up to speed for September. What is this, the 6th? And it's just wonderful. It's beautiful. A 365-day calendar, observations from the country. I think he lived in Vermont. I should have researched that. Sorry, I didn't. But it's beautiful. And if you like the style of writing that Edwin Way Teal is another, again, Thoreau, Emerson. At this time of the year, especially in the fall, I love the fall. It's my favorite season. Oops, I'm always doing that with the microphone. I tend to go inward. I'm looking for that, maybe, I don't know, these are cozy, I guess is the word. And a pause in the day to kind of stop and through his eyes, look at what he was looking at, the trees, the birds, the rivers, the woods, the barn. I never lived on a farm, so I don't know much about the barn, but anyway, I tend to go inward. I read poetry. It's a softening of the year for me, and I absolutely love it. I live in the South now, North Carolina, and while September is really a date, on a calendar, it hasn't really, fall is definitely not here yet. Although we did have a cold spell, which has me jumping into kind of fall literary choices. So anyway, Hal Borland, I guess connecting these two books, you can see them both, I don't know. Sybil talks a lot about nature in her letters. She likes, walking down to the river at her home and listening to the birds. So she also loves nature. That would be maybe the link between these two. And so, if you're familiar with Hal Borland, which, like I said, he's not exactly mainstream, let me know. Let me know about both of these books, about anything. What are you reading? I want to know. Yeah, if you're so inclined, please leave. I would love your comments on these books, other books, life, the fall, whatever you think, whatever pops up in your head. I would love to know. Thank you again for watching. And I appreciate you taking the time. If you're so inclined, please hit the subscribe button. And I'm dropping these videos once a week. They drop usually Mondays at 5 o'clock on YouTube. So I hope to see you again here soon. All right. Till next time. Bye-bye.